Alina took a sip. She didn't think anything of it. The wine was good, the restaurant was warm, and Morgan was in the middle of a story about a property deal in Miami that she was only half listening to. She smiled at the right moments, laughed when it seemed appropriate, took another sip. That was when something shifted. Not dramatically, not the way it happens in movies where the room spins and the music goes dark. It was quieter than that. Subtle, like someone had turned the volume of the world down by 30%. Her thoughts, which were usually sharp and fast, started arriving a little late, like they were traveling through water. She set the glass down. Morgan was still talking. He had very white teeth and a very easy smile, and he'd been perfect, almost too perfect, across 3 dates. Tonight he'd suggested Oksana, and she'd said yes immediately because Oksana was her place. Her Thursday restaurant. The corner booth. The doenjang jjigae with the jollof rice fusion that shouldn't work but absolutely did. The servers who already knew her name. She'd been coming here for 6 weeks. It felt like coming home. She blinked. Morgan's voice was still going, but the words weren't connecting to meaning anymore. She focused on his mouth and tried to catch up. Something about square footage. Something about a buyer from Houston. She nodded. Her hand felt heavy when she reached for the water glass. She told herself she was tired. She'd had a long week. 2 client consultations back to back, a permit filing that had gone sideways, and she'd only eaten a handful of almonds since noon. The wine just hit differently on an empty stomach. That was all. That was all. Except her body didn't believe her. Her chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with the wine and everything to do with something deeper, something biological, the part of a woman that has been trained across generations to notice when something is wrong even when the brain is too polite to say it out loud. Something is wrong. She pressed her fingertips flat against the white tablecloth. The texture felt far away. She looked at Morgan. He was watching her now, not talking, and his expression had changed into something she couldn't quite read. The easy smile was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something patient. Something waiting. She opened her mouth to say she wasn't feeling well. He spoke first. "You okay? You look a little tired." His voice was gentle, concerned. A performance so smooth she almost believed it. "I'm fine," she said. The words came out slow. She heard herself say them, and they sounded foreign. Maybe some air? He was already standing, already reaching for her arm, already smiling at a passing waiter with the confident look of a man who has done this before. Has done this before. That thought broke through the fog like a needle. She pulled her arm back. Or she tried to. Her arm moved, but not fast enough, not with enough force, and Morgan's grip adjusted like he'd expected exactly that. "Easy," he said softly, still smiling. "I've got you." Nobody in the restaurant was looking at them. Why would they? They looked like a couple. A man helping his girlfriend who'd had one too many. Nothing to see. Nothing to question. Except the camera in the upper left corner of the dining room was recording everything. And the man watching that camera feed upstairs had stopped breathing. Now, before we go any further, if you've ever trusted the wrong person, if you've ever sat across from someone and felt something was off but talked yourself out of it, stay right here. Because this story is about to show you exactly what happens when the wrong man picks the wrong woman in the wrong restaurant. Drop a comment right now, telling me your story. Let's talk about it. And if you're new here, subscribe. Because this channel tells the kind of stories that will keep you up at night in the best possible way. Like this video so more people find it. Now let's get back to Alina, because help is coming from somewhere she never expected. Upstairs. The private floor above Oksana's dining room was not on any public floor plan. It did not appear in the restaurant's permits. It had its own elevator, its own entrance, and its own particular kind of silence. The silence of a place where important things happened quietly. Chang-wook stood in front of a monitor the size of a dining table. Around him, 3 men were in the middle of a financial briefing. Numbers. Projections. A supply chain adjustment that needed his approval before midnight Seoul time. Papers were being pointed at. Someone was explaining something about a Lagos wire transfer. He was no longer listening. His eyes were on the monitor, specifically on camera 7. The dining floor. Corner booth. Seo-jun appeared at his elbow. Seo-jun had been his right hand for 9 years, and he could read Chang-wook's stillness the way other people read words. He looked at the monitor. He saw what Chang-wook was seeing. The woman in the corner booth, the way her hand moved too slowly to the water glass, the man beside her now standing, gripping her arm with the particular grip of someone who did not intend to be refused. Seo-jun turned to the room. Everybody out. The financial briefing ended immediately. Chang-wook did not move for 4 seconds. He watched Morgan's hand on Alina's arm. He watched Alina try to pull back. He watched Morgan smile at the waiter. Then he straightened his jacket. Which exit is he planning? His voice was very calm. Seo Jun was already on the radio. Front. Car is waiting. Black Escalade. No plates. Chang-wook walked to the private elevator. Pressed the button for the dining floor. The elevator doors closed. Seo Jun spoke into his radio. Nobody leaves through the front. Move the car. Downstairs, a valet approached the Black Escalade and explained very politely that there was a parking issue and the vehicle needed to be repositioned. The driver had no choice. The dining floor elevator opened. Ji Chang-wook stepped out. The staff saw him first. 3 servers stopped mid-motion. A hostess straightened immediately. The floor manager turned from a table and his entire body went rigid because in 4 years of working at Oksana, he had never once seen the owner come downstairs during service. Not once. Chang-wook walked through the dining room like he owned it, which he did, and like he had nowhere to be, which was a lie. His eyes were fixed on the corner booth. Morgan had Alina half out of her seat now, his arm around her waist, still performing the caring boyfriend for anyone who glanced over. Chang-wook reached the table and sat down. Not across from them. Not beside them. He simply pulled out the empty chair across from Morgan, the chair Morgan had been sitting in minutes ago, and he sat in it with the ease of a man sitting in his own living room, and he looked at Morgan, and he said very pleasantly, "I don't believe we've met." Morgan went very still. Not the kind of still that comes from surprise. The kind that comes from calculation. His smile stayed on his face because men like Morgan practiced their smiles the way other people practiced instruments, until the smile became automatic, until it could operate independently of whatever the rest of him was feeling. "Hey." Morgan's voice stayed warm. "We were just heading out. My girl isn't feeling too." "She's not your girl." Chang-wook said it the way you'd correct a minor factual error. Gently. Precisely. With zero hostility and absolute authority. Morgan looked at him properly for the first time. He took in the suit. The stillness. The way 2 men had materialized at the edges of the room without appearing to move. He looked back at Chang-wook's face, and something behind his eyes shifted. The calculation was happening faster now. "I'm the owner of this restaurant," Chang-wook said. He reached across the table and moved Alina's wine glass to the far side, away from her, like it was simply in the way. "I make it a point to check on guests who seem uncomfortable." "She's fine." Morgan's arm was still around Alina's waist. "She will be." Chang-wook looked at Morgan's arm. Just looked at it. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The arm came away from Alina's waist. Even through the fog thickening in her head, Alina felt the shift. She felt Morgan's grip loosen. She felt the cool air where his arm had been. She turned her head slowly toward the man now sitting across from her, and her brain, working at half speed, tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Tall, Korean. Watching Morgan with eyes so calm, they were almost frightening. "There's a car outside that's going to take you home," Chang-wook said to her. Not to Morgan. To her. His voice dropped slightly, just for her, like the rest of the room didn't exist. "You're safe." She stared at him. "Who are?" she started. "You can ask me everything later," he said. "Right now I need you to stand up." And here's the thing about Alina Edwards. Even with her thoughts moving through water, even with her body running on 30%, when someone spoke to her like they meant it, not performance, not charm, just plain and direct and real, some essential part of her responded. She stood up. Morgan tried one more time. "Listen, I don't know who you are, but this is." Chang-wook looked at him. Just looked at him. Morgan stopped talking. Morgan, who had run 3 operations in 2 different cities, who had never once been rattled, who had a clean record and a manufactured identity and a car waiting outside. Morgan looked into Ji Chang-wook's eyes and felt something he hadn't felt since he was 19 years old and made a very bad decision in the wrong neighborhood. He felt like prey. "Finish your meal," Chang-wook said to Morgan. "It's already been paid for." He stood up, steadied Alina with one hand at her elbow, and walked her out of the dining room. Not fast. Not urgently. Calmly. The way you'd walk someone you'd known for years. The staff parted. Nobody stared. The floor manager held the private elevator door open. The doors closed. Morgan sat alone at the corner booth with 2 wine glasses and a bread basket, and the particular feeling of a plan that had just disintegrated in real time. He looked at his phone. He needed to make a call. But first he needed to think. Because whoever that man was, he had not made a single threat, had not raised his voice, had not touched Morgan or called security or made any kind of scene. He had simply sat down and dismantled the entire operation with eye contact and a sentence. Morgan had been in this business long enough to know that the men who did it quietly were the ones you needed to be afraid of. He left the restaurant 4 minutes later without finishing his meal. The Black Escalade was gone. He stood on Michigan Avenue in the cold Chicago night and called the number he was supposed to call only in emergencies. It rang 4 times. There's a problem, Morgan said. Upstairs, in the private elevator, Alina was leaning against the wall because standing was requiring more effort than it should. The suited man was standing 2 feet away from her, not touching her, watching her with the particular attention of someone who was monitoring something important. What did he give me, she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. We're going to find out, Chang-wook said. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. The elevator opened into a room she wasn't prepared for. Clean lines, low lighting, a couch, a kitchen, a floor-to-ceiling window with all of Chicago laid out below it. A doctor, an actual doctor, she would learn later, was already there, kit open, waiting. Alina stopped walking. Who are you, she asked. Chang-wook stood by the elevator. Right now I'm the person who got you out of that booth. The rest we can discuss when your head is clearer. She looked at the doctor. At the room. At the city burning below the window. She looked back at him. I don't know your name, she said. Ji Chang-wook. She repeated it slowly, like she was storing it somewhere important. Then she walked to the couch, sat down, and let the doctor take her blood pressure. She kept her eyes on Chang-wook the entire time. He met her gaze without looking away. Neither of them said anything else. The doctor worked quietly. Outside, Chicago moved on without them, indifferent and glittering. And in the corner booth 14 floors below, a busboy cleared away 2 wine glasses and a breadbasket and had no idea that the night had changed 3 people's lives completely. What do you think Alina should do right now? Trust this stranger or fight her way out? Drop your answer in the comments. This is where it gets complicated. She woke up to light. Not the sharp, disorienting light of somewhere dangerous. Soft light. Morning light. The kind that came through good curtains that were doing their best, but couldn't quite stop Chicago sunrise from doing what Chicago sunrise did. Alina lay still for 3 seconds before she moved. She always did this. She'd done it since she was a little girl on the south side, and her mother told her the first thing you do when you wake up somewhere unfamiliar is listen before you move. So she listened. Quiet. Real quiet. The expensive kind. She sat up. The room was minimal. White walls, a dark wood floor, one piece of art she didn't recognize above a low dresser. Her shoes were by the door, placed neatly. Her bag was on the chair across the room, closed, undisturbed. On the nightstand, a bottle of water, a small packet of electrolytes, and a folded piece of paper. She picked up the paper. You're safe. There's food in the kitchen when you're ready. Your clothes are in the en-suite. No name. No explanation. No apology. She read it twice, then put it down, then picked it up and read it again like it might say something different. It didn't. She found the en-suite. Her clothes from last night were hanging up, not in a strange way, just hung up, like someone had thought about the wrinkles. There was a brand new toothbrush still in the packaging on the sink counter. A folded towel. Someone had thought about every practical thing and nothing sentimental. She showered. Not because she felt safe. Because she needed to feel like herself before she dealt with whatever this was. When she came out, Chang-wook was in the kitchen. He was standing at the stove, which surprised her, and he was making eggs, which surprised her more. He was still dressed. Different clothes now, dark shirt, no jacket. And he had the focused look of someone who applied full attention to whatever they were doing, including scrambled eggs. He heard her come in and turned around. How's your head? He asked. I'd like my phone, she said. He nodded at the kitchen counter. Her phone was there, fully charged. She crossed the room and picked it up without looking away from him. 14 missed calls. 7 texts. Her best friend Tiwa had escalated from "Hey, how's the date?" to "Alina, I will call the police" in the span of about 2 hours. She called Tiwa back first. I'm fine, she said, before Tiwa could speak. Something happened, but I'm okay. I'll explain later. Don't call anyone. She hung up before Tiwa could respond. Then she turned to Chang-wook. Where's my Uber? Whenever you want, he said. Eat first. I don't want to eat. I want an explanation. He put a plate on the counter anyway. Eggs. Toast. Sliced fruit on the side. He slid it toward her like it was a normal morning. She looked at the plate. She looked at him. She hadn't eaten since those almonds the previous afternoon, and her body staged a small rebellion against her pride. She ate standing up at the counter, which felt like a compromise. He stood on the opposite side and drank his coffee and let her eat without talking. She hated that she appreciated that. The man at dinner, she said. Morgan. Yes. You knew something was wrong before I did. Our cameras flagged it, he said. He put something in your drink when he stood up. She set her fork down. She'd known, on some level, because her body had told her. But hearing it said plainly in a quiet kitchen over scrambled eggs made it land differently. Made it real in a way that the foggy, frightened version of last night hadn't let her fully feel. What did he give me? Something that works in under 20 minutes and leaves the system in about 6 hours. The doctor ran a talk screen last night. You'll be completely clear by now. She was quiet for a moment. Why did he do it? Chang-wook looked at her. That's the part we're still working on. She caught the we but filed it away. You said last night the rest could wait until my head was clearer. She pushed the empty plate aside. My head is clear. He put his coffee cup down. He looked at her the way he looked at everything. Like he was processing 17 variables simultaneously and waiting until he had enough information before he spoke. The man's name isn't Morgan, he said. That's the first thing. She had suspected this, but hearing it still felt like a step off an unseen curb. His real name we're still verifying. Chang-wook continued. But what we know is that he isn't a real estate developer. His entire profile online was created recently. His phone number traces to a prepaid registered out of Detroit. Alina stared at him. How do you know all of this? He didn't answer that question. He moved to the next fact instead, which was its own kind of answer. He's done this before. Different cities. Different targets. He's very practiced. Targets. She repeated the word. What does he do with them? Chang-wook looked at her steadily. He delivers them. The kitchen was very quiet. Alina's hands were flat on the counter. She was keeping herself extremely still because if she didn't, she thought something might crack open inside her. She was 28 years old. She was a freelance interior designer from the south side of Chicago. She took care of her mother on Sundays and tipped her servers 25% and drove a 5-year-old Camry, and she was sitting in a stranger's kitchen being told she had almost been delivered somewhere by a man who had sat across from her and smiled and asked all the right questions. Why me? She asked. Her voice was very quiet. Chang-wook was quiet for a moment. We're working on that. She nodded once. She picked up her phone and opened the Uber app. I need to go home. I'll have someone drive you. I don't need. Alina. It was the first time he'd used her first name. She didn't know why it stopped her. It did. Last night was not random, he said. Until we understand why you were targeted, going home alone isn't safe. She looked at him. And you are safe? He didn't answer immediately, which was the most honest thing he could have said. Safer than going home alone right now, he said finally. She sat there with her phone in her hand, and the Uber app opened, and 3 seconds passed, then 5. Then she closed the app. I want answers, she said. Real ones. Not whatever you've been giving me. Okay, he said. Today. Okay. She looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at Chicago. She'd grown up in this city. She knew its bones. And she was sitting 14 floors above it, feeling like the ground had dropped out from under her life without making a sound. While Alina was eating scrambled eggs 14 floors above Michigan Avenue, Morgan was sitting in a parked car on a side street in Wicker Park, waiting for a call he did not want to receive. It came at 8:47 in the morning. The voice on the other end belonged to a man named Deo Bello, and Deo Bello did not raise his voice. That was the thing about him that people always underestimated. They expected a man who ran the kind of operation Deo ran to be loud about it, to perform the power. Deo never did. He spoke the way accountants spoke. Precisely, without feeling, focused entirely on what the numbers meant. Tell me what happened, Deo said. Morgan told him. All of it. The restaurant. The owner appearing from nowhere. The calm. The absolute, terrible calm of the man. Deo was quiet for a long moment. You know whose restaurant that is, Deo said. It was not a question. I found out this morning, Morgan said. Then you understand the problem. Morgan understood the problem. The problem was that Chang-wook was not a restaurant owner the way other men were restaurant owners. Oksana was one of 4 legitimate businesses that sat above an operation so clean and so deeply structured that the FBI's organized crime unit had spent 3 years looking at it and come away with nothing substantial. The operation had roots in Seoul, with branches that had quietly embedded themselves in Chicago over the past decade. Morgan had known this. He had been told by Deo to use the restaurant specifically because it was neutral ground, because nobody operating in Chicago touched Chang-wook's places. The theory had been that Chang-wook never came downstairs. The theory had been wrong. She's still there, Morgan said. In his building. Another silence. Deo breathed once, measured. Why was she at that restaurant? She went there regularly. Before I ever contacted her. I used it because she was comfortable there. So he already knew her face. Morgan said nothing because there was nothing useful to say. Step back, Deo said. I'll find another way to resolve the problem. The call ended. Morgan sat in the parked car for a long time after. Then he started the engine and headed for the interstate. Chicago was done. He'd learned in this business that when a job went sideways and a man like Chang-wook was involved, the city became very small very quickly. He needed distance. He needed Detroit. He drove north on 90 and tried not to think about the eyes of the man who had sat across from him at that table. The eyes that had looked at his arm on Alina's waist and said nothing, done nothing, just looked. Morgan had been in rooms with dangerous men before. He had been threatened, been followed, been in situations that ended badly for people around him. He knew danger the way someone who worked in bad weather knew weather. What he had felt in that restaurant was different. What he had felt was that the man across from him had already decided everything and was simply waiting for Morgan to understand it. He drove faster. Back in the private floor above Oksana, Seo-jun laid a folder on the table in front of Chang-wook. Chang-wook was standing at the window. Chicago below him, gray and cold and indifferent. She's still in the guest room? Seo-jun asked. Kitchen, Chang-wook said. Seo-jun paused. You told her to eat? She hadn't eaten. Seo-jun looked at him for a moment. In 9 years, he had learned not to comment on certain things. He opened the folder instead. His name is Remy Adeyinka. Nigerian national, Lagos origin, has been working with Deo Bellows Network for about 2 years. 3 previous operations we know of. 2 in Atlanta, 1 in Minneapolis. All 3 targets were women. All 3 were delivered without incident. He paused. Until last night. And Alina Edwards. Chang-wook turned from the window. Why her specifically? Seo-jun turned to the second page. 8 months ago, she was contracted by a commercial real estate firm called Trident Property Group to design and fit out a building on the near north side. Warehouse conversion. She did the full interior, layout, permits, the lot. He tapped the page. Trident Property Group is a shell. It belongs to Deo. Chang-wook was very still. She has filed permits with the city, Seo-jun continued. She has records, floor plans, load-bearing assessments. She physically walked through every room of a building that Deo uses as a transit point. She doesn't know what the building is, but she has information about it that he can't afford to have walking around in someone's head. She's a loose end, Chang-wook said. An extremely well-documented one. Chang-wook looked at the folder. At the photo of Alina attached to the background check. A social media photo. Her laughing at something outside. She had no idea. She had gone to work, done her job well, filed her permits properly, and in doing so had accidentally stepped into the middle of something that had nothing to do with her life. Does Deo know she's here? He will soon, Seo-jun said. Remy, Morgan, will have reported last night. And the Seoul Council? Seo-jun's expression shifted slightly. Mr. Choi called this morning. He's aware that something happened at the restaurant. He's asking for a report. Chang-wook nodded. Tell him the situation is contained. Is it? Chang-wook picked up the folder and walked toward the kitchen, where Alina was, where the plate he'd made her was sitting. He stood in the doorway and watched her at the counter, phone in hand, Uber app open, deciding. He watched her close the app. He felt something shift in his chest that he did not examine closely. It will be, he said. He walked in and sat across from her and gave her the real answers she'd asked for. Not all of them. Not the parts that would send her running before he could keep her safe. But enough. The building. The permits. Trident Property Group. The fact that she had unknowingly documented the interior of a building that a very dangerous man used for a very terrible purpose. He watched her face as she understood it. He watched the fear move through her, and then something else, something sharper, move in behind it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I have the original floor plans. On my laptop at home. I filed copies with the city, but I keep the originals. Chang-wook looked at her. That means Deo doesn't just have a problem with what's in my head, she said. He has a problem with what's on my hard drive. She was right. He hadn't thought about the hard drive. She looked at him. My apartment isn't safe. No, he agreed. So what do we do? That word again. We. She'd said it without thinking and didn't take it back. Chang-wook looked at this woman who had come to his restaurant for 6 weeks and ordered the same food and sat in the same corner and sketched in her notebook and had absolutely no idea that the world underneath the world she lived in had already chosen her as a problem to solve. And he made the decision that Seo-jun would later call the most complicated thing he had ever watched his boss do. Stay here, he said. 2 days. We handle it, and then you go home. She looked at him for a long time. And if I say no, then I'll have someone escort you home and post security outside your building and hope that's enough. He held her gaze. But it might not be. She set her phone face down on the counter. She looked out the window at her city. If you were Alina right now, what would you do? Stay with a man you just met who clearly has his own dangerous world, or take your chances and go home. Drop it in the comments. Because whatever she chooses, the next 48 hours are going to change her life in ways she is not ready for. She stayed. Not because she fully trusted him. Not because the fear had gone anywhere. She stayed because she was Alina Edwards, and Alina Edwards had never once in her life run from a problem that she had enough information to face. Right now, she had very little information, which meant she needed more before she could make any real decisions. And the most information in the room was sitting across from her in a dark shirt, drinking his second coffee of the morning. She asked for a phone charger. He produced one. She asked for a change of clothes. A woman appeared within 20 minutes with a bag from a store 2 blocks away. The right size. No explanation of how they knew her size. She asked for her laptop from her apartment. He made a call. The laptop was there within the hour, retrieved by someone she never saw. She said thank you for none of it. She wasn't sure yet if gratitude was appropriate. She set up her laptop at the kitchen counter and opened her files on the Trident Property Group project. 8 months of work. Consultation notes. Measurement sheets. Structural assessments. The full interior design package for a warehouse on the near north side that she had genuinely believed was being converted into a creative hub for a tech startup. She had liked that project. The bones of the building were good. High ceilings, original brick, the kind of space that had real character. She had put thought into it, care into it. She remembered standing in the middle of the main floor with her measuring tape and thinking the natural light was exceptional. She closed the consultation notes. She couldn't look at them the same way. Seo-jun came in sometime around noon, looked at the laptop, looked at Chang-wook, and communicated an entire conversation with his face. Chang-wook communicated back with a slight movement of his head. They had clearly been doing this for years. The files are important, she said without looking up. If Dao's people get into my laptop remotely, they can delete them. I need to copy everything. Seo-jun looked at her, then at Chang-wook, then back at her. You understand what's happening here. I understand that someone hired me to document a building and then tried to have me kidnapped when they realized I could describe every room from memory. She looked up. How am I doing? Seo-jun blinked. He turned to Chang-wook and said something in Korean. Chang-wook responded in Korean. 2 sentences, quiet. What did you just say? Alina asked. He said you were sharper than expected. Chang-wook said. I told him I knew. She looked at him. Something happened in the space between them, something small and unannounced, like a door opening by 1 inch. She went back to her laptop. They spent the afternoon working in the same room without talking much. This was something she noticed. He didn't fill silence. Most men she knew were uncomfortable with quiet and moved to fix it. Chang-wook moved through silence like it was furniture, like it was simply part of the room and there was no reason to rearrange it. She watched him work when she thought he wasn't looking. Phone calls in Korean that he stepped away for. Emails he typed fast with both hands. Documents Seo-jun brought that he read and annotated in a red pen with very small, precise handwriting. He managed a lot. She could see that. The weight of many things passed across his desk, and he absorbed each one without changing his face. At some point he made tea. He brought her a cup without asking. She almost said she didn't want it. It was very good tea. Around 5 p.m., she found something in her files she hadn't thought about in months. A photograph she'd taken on her phone during the build, sent to herself for reference. It was a photo of the basement level. She'd gone down there once to check the floor plan against what was actually built, and something hadn't matched. A wall that wasn't on the original plan, positioned in a way that didn't make structural sense for the conversion they described to her. She'd noted it in her records, filed it as a minor discrepancy, thought nothing more about it. She looked at the photograph now with completely different eyes. A wall that wasn't on the plan. In a basement. Her stomach turned. She carried the laptop to where Chang-wook was sitting. She turned it to face him and pointed at the photograph. There's a room down there, she said. Behind this wall. It's not on any of the permits I filed because it's not on any plan I was given. Someone built it after I finished the layout. Chang-wook looked at the photograph. Something moved behind his eyes. Or before, Seo-jun said from across the room. He'd been quiet, so long she'd half forgotten he was there. How big? Chang-wook asked. His voice was very level. She used her finger to trace the wall in the photo and estimated from memory. Big enough, she said quietly. The room was silent. Chang-wook sat back. He looked at the photograph for a long time. Then he took a slow breath and she saw something happen in his jaw. A muscle tighten and release. A brief and controlled moment of something that wasn't quite anger, but lived in the same neighborhood. Dao's been using it as a transit point, he said. Not to her. To Seo-jun. Not storage. Transit. He stood up. How long has this building been operational? Based on when she completed the project, Seo-jun said, pulling out his phone. Approximately 7 months. 7 months, Chang-wook repeated. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to the room and his hands in his pockets, and said nothing. She watched his reflection in the glass. He was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere cold and calculating where he was doing math that she didn't have the variables for. This breaks the treaty, Seo-jun said quietly. Chang-wook said nothing. The Lagos Council agreed. Civilian buildings in the treaty zone are completely off limits for operational use. A transit house inside the city boundary, in a building registered under a shell that operates near our interests, Seo-jun stopped. This was deliberate. Deo built this right next to our territory line, and then tried to remove the only civilian with documentation of it. If he succeeds with Alina, the building stays clean. The treaty holds. And we never know. He knew we'd find the attempt at the restaurant, Chang-wook said. Still at the window? Yes. Which means he wasn't worried about us finding out about Alina. He was counting on us stepping aside. Treaty protocol. Non-interference in civilian disputes. Chang-wook turned from the window. He thinks I'll hand her over to keep the peace. The room was very quiet. Alina had been listening. She was good at listening. She'd learned a long time ago that if you stayed quiet long enough in a room, people forgot you were there and said real things. She had been doing this her whole career, sitting in client meetings, listening underneath the words for what the room was actually telling her. What this room was telling her was that she was sitting in the middle of a territorial war between crime organizations, and the man who might be the only thing between her and whoever Deo Bello sent next had just been told to step aside. She looked at Chang-wook. Are you going to? She asked. He looked at her. Step aside, she said. Hand me over. Keep your peace. He held her gaze for a long moment. The room held its breath. No, he said. One word. No hesitation. No qualifier. Just no, the way you'd say it about something that was simply not a question. She nodded once. She turned the laptop back around and went back to her files. But her hands were not completely steady. Subscribe if you haven't, because this story is about to shift into something nobody saw coming. What do you think Chang-wook is about to do? Comment below, because I want to know if you're seeing what I'm seeing. Night came and nobody left. It wasn't a decision that was announced. It simply became clear around 8 p.m. that there was nowhere for her to go and nowhere she particularly wanted to be, and so Alina Edwards spent her second evening in a building she'd never intended to be in a city she knew by heart, in a life that had become unrecognizable in under 24 hours. Seo-jun ordered food. Good food. The kind that came from actual restaurants and arrived in proper containers with no plastic cutlery, because apparently even takeout had standards at this altitude of the world. She ate. Chang-wook ate. Seo-jun ate standing in the kitchen and then announced he had calls to make and disappeared. They were alone. This was the first time they'd been properly alone since the morning, and Alina was very aware of it, and she was fairly certain he was too, but he showed nothing, which was its own kind of information. She pulled her sketchbook out of her bag. She always had it. She'd had it since she was 16, and a teacher told her she had an eye, and she should use it. She opened it to a blank page, and she started drawing. Not the building. Not floor plans. Just lines. She did this when she needed to think. Let her hand move and trusted her brain to work underneath it. He noticed the sketchbook. Of course he did. He noticed everything. You were drawing in the restaurant, he said. Every Thursday. She looked up. You watch the cameras that much? He didn't answer, which was its own answer. It was the same notebook, he said. I have 3, she said. Same brand. I go through about 1 every 2 months. What do you draw? Spaces. Buildings. Sometimes people. She paused. Mostly what I see when I look at something and imagine what it could be. He was quiet for a moment. Show me. She almost said no. She was protective of her sketchbooks. They were the honest version of her. The version that existed before she put on the professional smile and told clients what they wanted to hear. She looked at him across the coffee table. She turned the book and slid it across. He picked it up. He looked at it with the same quality of attention he gave everything. Serious, unhurried, genuinely looking. He turned pages slowly. Didn't say anything for a long time. This one, he said. He turned the book back to face her. It was a drawing she'd done of the interior of Oksana, done from memory one evening at home. The high ceilings, the way the lighting fell in layers, the proportions of the room. She'd drawn it because it had moved her aesthetically. She felt heat in her face. You drew my restaurant, he said. I didn't know it was yours at the time. What did you think of it? She took the sketchbook back. I thought someone with taste designed it. The way the light works, it's intentional. Most restaurant owners buy the same 3 chandeliers everybody else buys and call it ambience. This was actually thought about. I designed it, he said. She stopped. With an architect, he said. But the concept was mine. She looked at him differently than she had all day. The business calls, the red pen, the silence, all of it slotted into a new configuration. A man who noticed light and proportion and had opinions about space. She recognized that. It lived in the same part of her that the sketchbook came from. The corner booth, she said. The way it's positioned, you can see the whole room from it, but nobody walking in can see you immediately. There's a half wall that creates the privacy. That was deliberate, wasn't it? Yes, he said. Why? Because some people need to feel like they can observe before they commit to being somewhere. She looked at him for a long time. Are you talking about the booth or yourself? He looked back at her. Both. She pulled her sketchbook back into her lap. Outside, Chicago was doing what Chicago did. All that noise and light going about its business. Why do you watch the cameras? She asked. The dining floor. Why do you sit up here and watch? I don't usually. But you did on Thursdays. He was quiet. For how long? She asked. From the second week you came in. She'd suspected this, but hearing it said plainly did something to the air between them. She kept her voice level. That should probably bother me more than it does. Yes, he agreed. Why didn't you come down? He looked at his hands for a moment. Then at her. Because I knew that if I came downstairs I wouldn't be able to pretend I hadn't been watching. The room was very quiet. She didn't look away from him. He didn't look away from her. This was the kind of moment that asked you a question about who you were and what you were willing to admit. She looked away first. She picked up her sketchbook and opened it to a new page and started drawing again. But after a few seconds she said, without looking up, for what it's worth, I always tipped extra on Thursdays. The food was that good. I should have asked to speak to the chef. The chef is Korean, he said. He would not have taken the compliment well. He doesn't believe the fusion menu is working. It absolutely is, she said. That's what I told him. She almost smiled. She made sure she didn't. I need you to tell me about Deo Bello, she said. Still not looking up. Not the version where you protect me from information. The real version. He was quiet for a moment. Long enough that she looked up. The real version is complicated, he said. My whole life became complicated yesterday evening, she said. I can handle complicated. He leaned forward, put his forearms on his knees, looked at her directly, and then Chang-wook told her the truth. Not a version of it or the edited, protected summary. The real structure of what he ran in Chicago. The financial layer underneath for legitimate businesses. The Korean syndicate he answered to in Seoul. The treaty with the West African organizations, including Deo's, that had kept a particular peace in Chicago for 6 years. The clause in that treaty about civilian buildings. And how Deo Bello had broken it, deliberately, precisely, and had then tried to remove the only person with documented evidence that the break had occurred. She listened to all of it. She didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. When he finished, she was quiet for a while. So you're not a restaurant owner, she said. I'm also a restaurant owner. But primarily. He didn't answer. And the council in Seoul, she said. The people you answer to. They want you to step aside. Yes. But you said no. Yes. She looked at him. That has consequences for you. Yes. You knew that before you said it. Yes. She was quiet again. She looked down at her sketchbook. She'd been drawing without realizing it. She looked at what she'd drawn. It was him. Sitting where he was sitting, forearms on his knees, looking at her. She closed the sketchbook fast. What happens next? She asked. Tomorrow I find a way to resolve this without the treaty breaking completely, he said. Deo overreached. There are people on his side of this who know it. We find leverage, and we use it cleanly. And me? When it's resolved, you go home. Your life goes back to normal. Your records are protected, the building is dealt with, and your name appears nowhere in any of this. She nodded slowly. And between now and then, he held her gaze. You stay where I can make sure you're safe. She closed her laptop. She stood up. She walked to the window and looked at Chicago for a long time. She could see the south side from here if she looked at the right angle. She could see the grid of streets she'd grown up navigating. I want to help, she said. I know that building better than anyone. Every room, every entrance, every structural weakness. I know, he said. She turned around. Then stop planning around me and plan with me. He looked at her for a long moment. The longest moment of the night. Okay, he said. The next morning changed everything. Seo-jun came in at 7 a.m. with his face arranged in the careful expression he used when the news was bad, and he didn't want his boss to see how bad he thought it was. Chang-wook saw through it immediately because he always did. Deo made contact, Seo-jun said. He put his phone on the table, screen up. A message. Formal, brief, the language of men who had decided to be polite about something ugly. Deo Bello was invoking a clause in the treaty, the direct arbitration clause. He was requesting that Chang-wook hand Alina Edwards over to a neutral party for handling, citing that she was a civilian with operational information that posed a risk to a treaty-protected enterprise. He was using the treaty to demand the woman the treaty was supposed to protect. The audacity of it was almost architectural. Deo had built this in layers. The building, the breach, the attempt to remove Alina, and now this. If Chang-wook refused, he was the one breaking the treaty. If he complied, Alina disappeared, and the evidence of Deo's breach disappeared with her. Chang-wook read the message twice. He put the phone down. The Lagos representative? He asked. Mr. Adeoi has been copied on the message, Seo-jun said. He responded this morning. He's calling it a legitimate invocation. Adeoi knows what Deo is doing. Yes, Seo-jun said. He's protecting his own operation by standing behind Deo. If Deo falls, the scrutiny lands on all the West African affiliates in Chicago. Seo-jun paused. Seoul called again. Mr. Choi wants an answer before noon. Chang-wook stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there in the early morning light with his hands behind his back and his jaw tight, and Seo-jun waited because he had learned that the waiting was part of it, that Chang-wook's best decisions came from a place that needed room to breathe. Alina appeared from the hallway. She had clearly heard the last portion of this conversation. She was dressed, her sketchbook tucked under one arm and her laptop under the other. She looked at Seo-jun. She looked at Chang-wook's back at the window. She read the room. He found a way to use the treaty against me, she said. Not a question. Yes, Seo-jun said. She set her things down on the table. She opened her laptop. Then we have until noon to find something that makes the treaty argument irrelevant. Seo-jun looked at her. Then at Chang-wook, who still hadn't moved from the window. She's right, Chang-wook said. He turned around. What do you need? Everything you have on the building's financial trail, Alina said. Shell company registrations, permit filings, anything in the public record. I filed those permits under my company name. That means my work is attached to his chain. And if his chain is dirty, she tapped the laptop. My documentation becomes the thing that proves it. You want to use your own records against him? Seo-jun said. I want to use my own records to prove what he was doing in that building and where the money came from. My permits, my floor plans, my notes, cross-referenced with whatever financial trail you can pull. That's not a loose end he can disappear. That's a paper trail that's already in city records. She looked at Seo-jun. Can your people pull the shell company chain? Seo-jun looked at Chang-wook. Chang-wook nodded once. I'll have it in an hour, Seo-jun said. He left the room. Alina opened her files. Chang-wook came to the table and sat across from her, and within 5 minutes they were working side by side, and nobody commented on how natural it felt. The hour was quiet and focused. She organized her documentation in a sequence that told a story. Permit filing dates. Construction sign-offs. The discrepancies she'd logged about the basement wall. The photographs she'd taken during the project. Chang-wook made calls, short, precise, in Korean, and cross-referenced the information Seo-jun's team pulled on Trident Property Group. What emerged was not a smoking gun. It was better than that. It was a chain. Trident Property Group registered 6 months before the project started. Registered in Delaware, parent company in Lagos, bank account that moved money through 3 intermediaries before arriving in Chicago. One of those intermediaries had already been flagged in a separate federal investigation that had nothing to do with Deo and everything to do with the financial architecture around his operation. Alina's permits placed the building's construction timeline exactly within the window of that flagged financial movement. He used operational money to build the transit room, Chang-wook said. And I filed permits that established the construction dates, Alina said. Which means any forensic accountant who looks at this chain can place the illegal money movement at the same time as the physical construction. They're not separate events. She looked at him. Who do you know at the federal level? He held her gaze. You're asking me if I have contacts in federal law enforcement. You run a financial empire. You've kept the FBI away from it for years. Which means you understand exactly how they think and exactly who to hand this to in a way that lands on Deo specifically and leaves everything else alone. He was quiet. I'm not asking you to expose yourself, she said. I'm asking you to use what you know to protect both of us. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his personal phone. There's a deputy director at the Financial Crimes Unit, he said. We have a mutual understanding. Call him, she said. He dialed. She watched him. He waited 3 rings and then spoke crisply, in English, with the tone of a man who was providing information and not requesting a favor. He laid out the chain, the shell company, the financial movement, the transit location, the documentation and city records. He mentioned no names except Trident Property Group. He mentioned no treaty. He mentioned no Alina Edwards. He ended the call. 24 hours, he said. That's all we need, she said. Seo-jun came back into the room. He looked between them. He looked at the laptop, the notes, the organized documentation. He looked at Chang-wook. "Seoul," he asked. Chang-wook glanced at his watch. 11:48 a.m. "Tell Mr. Choi the situation is being resolved through legitimate channels," he said, "and that the treaty violation by Deo Bello will be a matter of public record by tomorrow morning, which means the arbitration request is invalid. You can't invoke a treaty to cover a treaty breach." Seo-jun's face did something that on anyone else would have been a smile. He took his phone and left the room. Alina closed her laptop. She let out a long breath. Not dramatically, just the breath of someone who has been holding tension in their chest for 20 hours and is allowing themselves one moment of release. Chang-wook was watching her. "You're good at this," he said. "At what?" "Finding the structure of a problem. Seeing how the pieces fit." "I'm an interior designer," she said. "That's the whole job. You look at a space and you figure out how everything needs to relate to everything else for the whole thing to work. Most people panic when the space is unfamiliar. I panicked yesterday morning," she said, "when I was eating your eggs standing up at the counter because I couldn't decide if it was appropriate to sit down." He looked at her. "That was panic?" "That was me performing not panicking," she said. "There's a difference." Something happened to his face. Small. Brief. It wasn't quite a smile. It was the shape that a smile leaves behind when the person isn't ready to actually smile. She had drawn faces her whole life, and she noticed things like that. She noticed a lot of things about him that she was very carefully not thinking about. "Tonight," she said, standing, closing her laptop, changing the subject to protect herself. "What do we do tonight?" "We wait," he said. "I hate waiting." "I know," he said. And the fact that he said it so easily, that he already knew this about her, from what? From weeks of watching her move through a dining room, made her chest do something inconvenient. "I'm going to sketch," she said. "Don't let Seo-jun hover." "He hovers." She picked up her sketchbook and walked to the window with the view of all of Chicago. He watched her go. He sat at the table with his phone in his hand and the calls he still needed to make, and he did not immediately make any of them. Seo-jun came back 5 minutes later, looked at Chang-wook not making calls, looked at Alina at the window, looked at the ceiling, and said nothing. Some things didn't need to be said. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in the white room with Chicago outside the window, and her brain refused to quiet. She kept replaying the chain of events the way you replay a near-miss accident, slowing it down, looking for every moment where it could have gone differently. The dinner. The sip. The way Morgan had said "I know" when she'd told him she loved Oksana. I know. He'd known because someone had watched her. Someone had mapped her patterns, found her routine, identified the place where she felt safest, and then sent a man in to use that safety against her. The intimacy of that was something she hadn't let herself fully feel yet, because she'd been too busy doing. But now in the dark with nothing left to plan, she let herself feel it, and it was awful. She got up. The main room was quiet. The city was quiet the way Chicago got quiet at 3 a.m. Not silent, never silent, but lower. She went to the kitchen and found the tea and made a cup without turning on the bright lights, just the under-cabinet light that made the room amber and soft. She didn't hear him come in. She just looked up and he was there, in the doorway, clearly awake, clearly not surprised to find her standing there. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "Not a question." "I don't sleep much," he said. She poured a second cup and slid it across the counter without asking. He came in and took it. He sat down at the counter on the opposite side, and they both held their cups and looked at the amber light and the city beyond. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "Why did you actually come downstairs?" "Don't say the cameras flagged it. Your security team could have handled it. You didn't need to be there personally." He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "I didn't need to be." "So why?" He looked at his cup. "Because it was you." The kitchen was very quiet. She turned the cup in her hands. "You don't know me. I know you take your doenjang jjigae with extra fermented paste. I know you sketch between courses and put the pen down when the food arrives because you actually respect the meal. I know you always thank your server when the food comes and again when they refill your water. I know you sit in the corner because you need to see the room before you relax in it." He paused. "I know you laugh at things on your phone and then look up like you want to share it with someone, and then remember you're alone and look back down." She was very still. "That last part," he said quietly. "I thought about that more than I should have." She didn't say anything. She didn't trust herself to say anything that wasn't too much or too little, so she said nothing, and they sat in the amber light with their tea and the city below doing its 3 a.m. things. After a while she said, "I came to Oksana the first time because of the rain. I didn't even plan to stay. I was going to wait out the rain and leave." "I know," he said. "The reservation system shows walk-in, no booking." But the food, she smiled despite herself. I was 3 bites into the jjigae and I thought, whoever made this understands something about how things that shouldn't go together can make something better than either of them alone. He looked at her. She looked back at him. That's good design, she said. That's good cooking. She stopped. That's what happens sometimes, he said quietly. Between different things. She put her cup down. She needed to not be looking at him. She looked at the window. This is a terrible time to feel whatever this is, she said. Yes, he said. It is. There's a dangerous man trying to make me disappear, and you're in the middle of a political situation with people in Seoul, and we've known each other for 2 days. 1 day and 21 hours, he said. She looked at him. Are you correcting me? I'm being precise. She almost laughed. She stopped it before it fully arrived. Okay, she said. She picked up her cup. We feel this after. When it's over. When I'm back home, and you're back to whatever this is. She gestured at the apartment, the empire, all of it. He was quiet for a moment. And if I came to the corner booth? She looked at him. I thought you didn't come downstairs. Maybe I'd make an exception. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she picked up her cup and walked back toward the hallway. At the door she stopped. Thursday, she said, without turning around. I'm always there by 7. She went back to bed. This time she slept. He stayed in the kitchen for a long time after, in the amber light, with a half-empty cup of tea and the particular stillness of a man who has just made a decision he didn't know he'd already made. Seo-jun appeared at 6 a.m. with news. The deputy director's office had moved fast, faster than Chang-wook expected, which meant the federal interest in Trident Property Group had already existed and the tip had landed on a file that was already open. By 6 a.m., 2 things had happened. Trident Property Group's Chicago accounts were frozen pending investigation, and Deo Bello's name appeared on a financial crimes watch list that hadn't included it the day before. It wasn't an arrest. It wasn't a raid. Not yet. But it was the kind of institutional move that changed the calculation for everyone involved immediately. Deo's partners, the ones who'd been standing behind him, could read the room. Standing behind a man who now had federal eyes on his money was a different proposition than standing behind a man with only a treaty dispute. By 7 a.m., Mr. Adeoi in Lagos had quietly withdrawn his support for Deo's arbitration request. By 8 a.m., the Seoul Council had received the Financial Crimes Watch List notification through their own channels, and Mr. Choi had called Seo-jun, not Chang-wook, which was his way of indicating he had no further objection to how Chang-wook had handled things. By 9 a.m., Deo Bello had left Chicago. Seo-jun told Chang-wook all of this in the hallway while Alina was in the shower. Chang-wook listened. He nodded. He asked 2 clarifying questions. He told Seo-jun to have someone clean the Trident documentation trail from Alina's professional records, not remove it from city files, those needed to stay, but ensure her business name was not the entry point anyone would follow. She's clear. Seo-jun asked. She will be by noon, Chang-wook said. Seo-jun nodded. He started to leave. He stopped. He turned back. The Seoul Council is going to ask about her eventually, he said. When this becomes a case. When the federal investigation opens properly. Her documentation is central to it. I know, Chang-wook said. That means she stays in this world, Seo-jun said. Not directly, but adjacent. They'll want to know who she is to you. Chang-wook was quiet. What do I tell them? Seo-jun asked. Chang-wook looked toward the hallway, where the sound of the shower had just stopped, where a woman with a sketchbook and a very precise understanding of how spaces worked was getting ready to go back to her life. Tell them she's under my protection, he said. Permanently. Seo-jun had been with Chang-wook for 9 years. He had watched his boss walk through floods and fires and boardrooms and courtrooms with the same unchanging face. He had never once heard Chang-wook say the word permanently about a person. Not once. He nodded carefully. He left the room. She found out it was over the way she found out most important things, by reading a room. She came out dressed and ready and found Seo-jun in the kitchen making coffee with the particular body language of someone who had just received good news and was deciding how to deliver it. Chang-wook was at the table. His posture was different. Lighter. Not dramatically. He was still Chang-wook, still contained, still exact. But she had spent 2 days learning the vocabulary of how he held himself, and she could read the difference. It's done, she said. Chang-wook looked up. Yes. Deo left the city this morning. The federal investigation will handle the rest. His accounts are frozen. His partners have stepped back. She stood in the kitchen doorway. She thought she'd feel relief. She did feel it. But underneath it was something else, something unexpected, a kind of grief she had no right to and no language for. And me? She asked. My records. Your professional documentation is protected. Your business name has been removed as the entry point for the investigation. The city permits stand. They're part of the public record, and they need to be, but nobody following the paper trail will arrive at you first. She nodded. You can go home, he said. She nodded again. She went back to the guest room and packed her things, which wasn't much because most of what she'd brought she'd been wearing. She zipped her bag. She looked at the room. The folded towel. The brand new toothbrush. The nightstand with the note that she'd read 3 times and then kept in the pocket of her jacket without thinking about why. She came back out. Seo-jun was gone. Chang-wook was standing. He had his hands in his pockets, and he was watching her come down the hallway with her bag over her shoulder. The car is downstairs whenever you're ready, he said. Okay, she said. They stood in the living room with all of Chicago behind him, and she was looking at him, and he was looking at her, and neither of them was moving toward the elevator. I have questions, she said, that I won't ask. I have things I won't say, he said, that you probably already know. She looked at him. This world of yours, she said. It doesn't really let people go, does it? Once you're adjacent to it. No, he said honestly. It doesn't. So what does that mean for me? It means you'll be protected, he said. Always. Whether you know it or not. I don't know how to feel about that. You don't have to decide right now, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the kitchen at 3 a.m. The tea. The way he'd said because it was you like it was the simplest thing in the world and also the most complicated. She picked up her bag. She walked to the elevator. She pressed the button. She watched the doors open. She stepped in. She turned around. He was standing where she'd left him, hands in his pockets, watching her. He didn't move. He wasn't going to ask her to stay. She knew that about him now. He had said what he had to say, and the rest was hers to carry or put down. The doors began to close. Ji Chang-wook, she said. The door stopped. He looked at her. Thursday, she said. 7 o'clock. The corner booth. The doors closed. He stood in the living room for a moment, completely still. Then Seo-jun walked in from somewhere and said, Seoul is requesting a formal debrief on the Bellows situation. Schedule it for Friday, Chang-wook said. I have something Thursday evening. Seo-jun did not say anything. He typed something into his phone. He left the room. Chang-wook walked to the window. The car was pulling out of the building below. He watched it until it turned onto Michigan Avenue and joined the river of the city. Alina sat in the back of the car and watched Chicago pass. She was tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. She pressed her head against the cool window. She thought about her apartment, her plants, which needed watering, her mother, who she owed a Sunday visit, her work, which had been paused for 2 days and was waiting patiently for her to return to it. Her phone buzzed. Tiwa. She answered. Are you actually okay? Tiwa asked immediately. I'm actually okay, Alina said. Because I have been in a full crisis on your behalf for 2 days, and I need details. I'll tell you over food, Alina said. Not all of it, but enough. Enough for what? Enough for you to understand why I'm going to a restaurant alone this Thursday and why I need you to not make it a thing. A pause. Alina. Tiwa. Who is he? Alina looked out the window. They were crossing into the south side now. Her streets. The grid she knew by feel. Someone who noticed me, she said quietly. Before I knew he was looking. Tiwa was quiet for a moment. Is he good? Alina thought about that honestly. She thought about the eggs. The tea. The way he said no when Sol told him to hand her over. The because it was you in the amber light. She thought about the world underneath his world and what it meant to be adjacent to it. He's complicated, she said. But yes, I think he's good. Okay, Tiwa said. Not asking more. That was the thing about a real friend. They knew when to ask and when to just hold the line. They stayed on the phone until the car pulled up to her building. Her building looked normal. Her street looked normal. 2 days ago, normal felt unremarkable. Right now, it felt like something worth protecting. She went inside. She watered her plants. She called her mother. She sat at her drafting table and opened her sketchbook to the page she'd quickly closed the night before. The sketch of Ji Chang-wook. Forearms on knees. Looking at her. She looked at it for a long time. Then she turned to a fresh page and started drawing Oksana again. From memory. The corner booth. The half wall that gave just enough privacy. The way the light fell in layers. Only this time she drew 2 people at the table. Comment below. Do you think Alina should go back Thursday? Do you think she fully understands what she's walking back into? Because I need to know what you're thinking, besties. Thursday came the way Thursdays always did, quietly, without ceremony, slipping in after Wednesday like it hadn't been the most anticipated day of the week. Alina got dressed the way she always dressed, for herself, not for anyone else. Something she liked. Something that said I'm here and I know it without needing to announce it. She took her sketchbook. She took her usual bag. She called a cab instead of the train because she wanted to arrive with her thoughts in order. She arrived at Oksana at 6:58 p.m. The host, the same woman who had worked the front since Alina's first Thursday, smiled at her in a way that was different from all the previous Thursdays. Not dramatically, just warmer, with a small additional quality that said you're not just a regular here anymore. Ms. Edwards, she said, your table is ready. Alina didn't say she hadn't made a reservation. She followed the host to the corner booth, the half wall, the exact angle from which you could see the whole room before the room could fully see you. She sat down. The sketchbook came out. She opened it. She looked around the room from her booth the way she always did, letting the space settle around her, taking inventory. The other tables. The low music that walked a careful line between ambient and absent. The way the light did exactly what she'd told him it did. Intentional, layered, considered. Her food arrived without her ordering. She looked at the plate. The doenjang jjigae with the jollof rice fusion that had started everything 6 weeks ago. Perfect. Exactly as it always was. She picked up her spoon. She looked at the camera in the upper left corner of the dining room. The small red light blinked steadily. She raised her water glass. Just slightly. A small toast to no one she could see. Upstairs, in the private floor that appeared on no public floor plan, Chang-wook was at his desk with Seo-jun standing across from him, delivering the end-of-week operational report. Numbers. Updates. A supply chain situation in Detroit that needed a decision. A call from Seoul that needed to be returned. And on the monitor on the far wall, camera 7, the dining floor, corner booth, a woman raising a water glass. Chang-wook picked up the glass of water on his desk. Seo-jun stopped his report mid-sentence. He looked at his boss holding a water glass toward a monitor. He looked at the ceiling. He looked back at his notes. The Detroit situation, he continued carefully. Do you want me to handle it? Chang-wook said. His eyes were still on the monitor. Seo-jun handled a lot of things. He added Detroit to the list. He gathered his papers. He walked toward the door. He stopped. He had been with Chang-wook for 9 years. He had watched him navigate situations that would have broken most men. He had watched him be brilliant and ruthless and occasionally brutal and always controlled. He had watched him look at a dining room camera on a Thursday and felt, each week, the specific sadness of a man who wanted something he wouldn't let himself go down and get. Sir, Seo-jun said. Chang-wook looked at him. The report can wait until morning. Chang-wook looked at him for a moment. He put his water glass down. He looked at the monitor. Camera 7. Corner booth. A woman eating her food, drawing in her sketchbook, sitting alone in a space that was built for people who needed to see the room before they could relax in it. He stood up. He straightened his jacket. He walked to the private elevator and pressed the button for the dining floor. When the doors opened, he stepped out, and the staff saw him, and went still in that way they always did when the owner appeared on the floor. The floor manager turned, and his eyes went wide. Chang-wook walked across the dining room. Not rushed. Through the soft music and the low light and the tables of people having ordinary Thursday evenings that would not change them. He reached the corner booth. Alina had her spoon halfway to her mouth. She lowered it. She looked at him standing at the edge of the booth with his hands at his sides and his face doing that thing it did when he was trying not to show more than he intended. You're on the dining floor, she said. I am, he said. You don't come to the dining floor. I know. She looked at him. She looked at the seat across from her. She looked back at him. Sit down, she said. He sat down. The server appeared, a young woman who had seen a lot in her time working at Oksana, but had never once seen the owner sit at a table. She recovered professionally. Can I get you anything, sir? Tea, Chang-wook said. Thank you. The server left. Alina picked up her spoon and went back to her food because she was going to finish her doenjang jjigae, and she was not going to let the situation make her nervous when she had specifically told herself she would not be nervous. He watched her eat. He didn't say anything yet. How's the Seoul Council? She asked. Satisfied, he said. Deo. The federal investigation is moving. He won't be in a position to be a problem for a very long time. She nodded. Good. The tea arrived. He thanked the server by name. She'd noticed before, he knew his staff's names. All of them. She filed that where she kept the things that told her who someone actually was when nobody was looking. I have a question, he said. You can ask me, she said. Why Thursday? She looked at him. What do you mean? You could come any day? The kitchen is the same. The booth is the same. He held her gaze. Why Thursdays specifically? She thought about it. She hadn't thought about it before. It was just what she'd always done. Thursday evenings after a week of client meetings and site visits and permit filings, she'd come here and sit and sketch and eat and decompress. It had been her ritual. When I was a kid, she said slowly. My dad used to take me for dinner every Thursday. Just the two of us. It was his day off. We'd go to this jerk chicken place on Halstead, and he'd let me order everything I wanted, and we'd stay until they started stacking chairs. She paused. He passed away when I was 19. I think. She looked at the table. I think I've been trying to recreate that feeling ever since. Of somewhere that's mine. A weekly thing that's reliable. He was quiet, listening in the way he listened, with his full self. Oksana started feeling like that, she said, before I even realized it. And now, he asked. She looked at him across the table in the corner booth with the half wall and the layered light and the camera blinking red in the corner. Now I know the owner, she said. Something happened to his face. That shape a smile leaves when the person isn't ready to fully smile. Except this time it went a step further. This time it became the actual thing. Chang-wook smiled. It was brief, small, like a door opening all the way for just a moment. She thought about all the people downstairs in this restaurant right now who had no idea what that looked like, and she felt something quietly extraordinary about being the one sitting here to see it. She went back to her food. He drank his tea. Outside the half wall, the restaurant moved around them. Plates arriving, conversations landing and lifting, the city being itself. They sat in the comfortable, specific silence of two people who had already survived something together and were now figuring out what everything after looked like. Her sketchbook was on the table. He looked at it. Can I? He asked. She slid it across. He opened it. He turned pages with the same careful attention as the first time. He stopped on the sketch she'd made 2 days ago and closed. The one she hadn't meant for him to see. He looked at it for a long time. You drew me, he said. You have good bone structure, she said, not looking up from her food. It's an occupational hazard. He turned the book back to face her. It's not just bone structure. She looked at the sketch. She looked at him. No, she said quietly. It's not just bone structure. He slid the sketchbook back. He picked up his tea. He looked out past the half wall at the dining room he'd designed for people who needed to see the room before they could settle into it. I've been thinking about something, he said. Tell me. The corner booth seats too. She looked at him. It does. It's been occupied by one person for 6 weeks. That's true. This seems like a design problem, he said. She pressed her lips together to stop the smile. It does seem like a design problem. I might be able to help, he said. I have some experience with spaces. I know, she said. I've seen your work. He looked at her. She looked at him. The smile arrived, fully this time, on her face, and she didn't stop it. Thursday evenings, she said. 7 o'clock. I'll be here, he said. They stayed until the restaurant began to empty. The servers cleared tables around them. The low music shifted to something slower. Chicago did its late evening thing outside the windows. All that complicated, beautiful, relentless life. Seo-jun, watching camera 7 from upstairs, saw his boss at a corner booth and a woman with a sketchbook and 2 people being, for the first time in a long time, somewhere close to exactly where they were supposed to be. He closed the monitor. He picked up his phone. He called Seoul. Mr. Choi, he said. The Bellows situation is fully resolved. The treaty holds. Chicago is stable. He paused. And Mr. Chang-wook will be unavailable on Thursday evenings from now on. Please schedule around it. He ended the call. He went to handle Detroit. But wait, because you didn't think this was over, did you? 3 days later, a new face walked into Oksana during the lunch service. Nobody who worked there had seen this man before. He was well-dressed, calm, the kind of calm that had been practiced over a long time. He sat at a table near the center of the room. He ordered nothing. He slid a photograph across to the server who came to take his order. The photograph was printed clearly on plain paper. No frills. Just 2 people sitting in a corner booth. A man in a dark shirt. A woman with a sketchbook. Taken through the restaurant window from the street. Tell the owner, the man said in accented English, that Lagos sends its regards. He stood up. He left money on the table for a meal he hadn't ordered. He walked out. The server stood with the photograph and looked at it and felt the particular cold of something that didn't have a name yet. Upstairs, when Chang-wook received the photograph, he looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Seo-jun. Find out who sent him, he said, and find out what Lagos wants. Seo-jun was already on the phone. And somewhere on the south side of Chicago, Alina Edwards was at her drafting table working on a new commission, completely unaware that the story she thought was over had barely begun. And that is where we leave them. For now, if this story grabbed you from the first sip to the last photograph, then you already know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and drop in the comments which moment had you the most hooked. Was it the restaurant? The kitchen at 3 a.m.? The Thursday ending? Tell me.